Welcome to another episode of The Guido Goes Off. This one's going to be a bit different. This will be a review of the recent episode of the Chasing Glory podcast. For those of you who are unaware of the show, it is a podcast. It's available on several sources, including Podcast One. It is done by former WWE ring announcer Lillian Garcia. It's a pretty well done podcast. But the reason why this episode in particular is definitely worth a listen, and it's because in this episode she interviews Paige. Uh, as we know, Paige, because we've covered recently, Paige came back after almost a year and a half out of action, and as we know, a lot of stuff happened in that year and a half. And she did say that this would be the only place she'd talk about it. After this, she'd never talk about it again on an interview or a podcast. I don't even think she said she'd do another podcast after this, at least as far as the subject matter was concerned. I mean, it is, rather informative hearing her side of things as it goes on. Um, but I'm not gonna lie, the first hour is pretty hard to get through because where um, the hard stuff comes into play. Um, so anyway, it opens up the two of them talking, and Lillian goes into before the actual interview. She goes into the backstory, um, of Paige's rise in WWE, and then her coming back, and that. Now she does mention her return and absolution later on, but then she talks about her early family life, then tells a story probably a lot of people don't know. Um, I can say it was eye-opening for me. She mentions a time where her mother, Sweet Soraya, up and disappeared for 6 months. Nobody knew where she was, and it was a very scary time. Her dad was really afraid, uh, and she and her brother went literally looking for her. And it took a bit to find her, and then it took a bit for uh, things to get back to a sense of normalcy. Um, Now, on a lot of this stuff, I'm not going to go into details. Um, you should honestly listen to this for yourself. Uh, and then the second thing she talks about is the leak. She opens that up with an incident that just happened a few weeks ago. Um, she was hanging out with Zara Schreiber, and a guy came up to her and said some things. Not flattering at all. And then she goes into um, the leak and what happened, and mentioning that she had contemplated taking her own life, and that for a long time it had even physical repercussions, as we know. Um, she wasn't eating. She mentioned her hair had been falling out. I think a lot of people know about the picture uh, that was taken at the restaurant where her ribs were showing, which would have been around about this time, which of course she hid and wrote off because trying to, keep private life private. Um, but she, mentions, having to get through that, and then, basically saying that because of her experiences, she could, help educate people, you know, of the dangers of this new technological age, where everybody has a camera on their phone, and what you should and clearly shouldn't um, take pictures of and post online, because as we know, all this was not things given willingly. These were hacked from several sources, and it's just a simple reminder in this instance. If you want to keep it private, don't film it. Don't take pictures of it, because as we've seen, sometimes what's done in private will not be private, um, and then she goes into her suspensions and the covering up of her drug use. She had mentioned that the first suspension, where it was simply she missed the test date, the testing time. For those of you that haven't read the wellness policy, once you're informed, hey, you're supposed to go test, you only have 2 hours. And she didn't get there. She was clean, but she missed the time, and that's a wellness file. Then she mentioned the second time. As we know, Paige, Lillian went into the tweets she released after that second pop, and Paige then said, yeah, I was an idiot. I did something stupid, and I got popped for it. And then she mentioned that she didn't go into detail about what it was she had been using, but that she had used it in the past, and and then she's talking about lying to her family to hide, hiding all this from them, and then finally coming clean. And then, of course, coming clean with WWE. She did mention that she did go into WWE-sponsored rehab. As pretty much everybody knows now, any WWE employee, past or present, has access to substance abuse counselors and rehab, all paid for by WWE, as part of wellness policy. And she said she's still going through it. She's been seeing seeing a WWE therapist, and as we can tell now, things are a bit better for her. And then after that, she gets into the good stuff, the happy stuff, I should say. Talking about her return, mentioning how nervous she was, and and talking about how how Vince and Triple H and Stephanie were so behind her, were so encouraging, because they're like, "You're great, you've got this." I think it was like right before she went out there, Steph pulled her aside and said, "You got this. They're gonna love you." And we, of course, know how the crowd reacted in Houston, loving it, loving her return, and it's been very responsive. I do think it's very interesting because she mentions at this time, and Lillian can coincide with this, where when you're working in front of a crowd, and everybody can be cheering for you and rooting you on and being go, go, go. And then there's this one dickbag or asshole that says, "You suck," or something something of that nature. And you focus on that one instead of the the thousands of people who are cheering for you and happy to see you and are glad you're here, because they came to see you and they want to see you succeed. It's then Paige mentions that around the time of all this stuff she's going through, she read a quote from Dita Von Teese. For those of you who don't know who Dita Von Teese is, I kind of know what she does, but Google it. Just Google her. Or this lady said a quote, "You could be the sweetest, juiciest, most tastiest peach in the world, but there's people who don't like peaches." It's essentially like that. It's you know, not everyone's going to like you. So they go into that. But she mentioned the you know uh, re rekindling her past friendships with rekindling her friendship with Rosa. You mentioned Zara again. Also talking about her relationship with Alicia Fox, or Foxy. And she mentioned that Foxy never gave up on her. Actually, would text her like every week, just to see how she was doing, and mentioning how good it is to have people like that in your life. That no matter what you do, and we know that there's a lot of um, pushing away because a lot of people kind of checked out of her life during this stuff. But there's the ones that are like, if you need something, I'm here. We all need people like that in our lives. She does then go into Absolution, working with Mandy and Sonia, and working with some of the girls in the back. Meeting some of these girls. She talks about talking with Nia Jax. There's a quick plug. Apparently next week on Chasing Glory, she's talking. Lillian's going to be talking with Nia Jax, and then basically, kind of in the closing of all that, just mentioning how sometimes she's standoffish with people, how she has trust issues, and who can blame her in some of these instances. And then Lillian mentioned something where she basically would she tried to say, hey, if you need to talk about anything, and then Paige kind of blew her off. It was that whole you're young, you think you know everything, and then you have situations where you realize, I don't know. It's not that I don't know anything. I don't know shit. And then you got people that are like, hey, we'll help you out. She mentioned Mark Carano be right there, giving her a big hug on the day when she returned, and having those people behind you, people supporting you, and especially having the support. I mean, not only of friends, but like having the support of the three most important people in WWE, because let's face facts, they could have written her off. They could have said, you know what, we're done, and they didn't. She then mentions the end of her relationship with El Gasbag. Basically just saying it was time to move on. I still say there's a lot of stuff we're not getting, and I have a feeling we're not going to. So we can probably speculate till the cows come home, but she mentions the whole, hey, my life is so public, my private life is so public. Which, I mean, that wrestlers are, people that people want to get to know, like celebrities. I mean, they're lower on the list of celebrities. I think, like, with the exception of like The Rock, because now he's a big time Hollywood actor. Which, interesting enough, there's a tidbit about The Rock in that. She actually mentioned that night she debuted on Raw, when she came into the main roster, it was actually The Rock who broke the news. And then she also mentions the upcoming movie with um, the upcoming Fighting with My Family movie, in which she also mentioned that The Rock was actually talking about that night, um, talking about making an adaptation of of that documentary and making it into a feature film. And she said she saw a pre-screening of it, really likes it. Uh, it tested very well with the test audience, so it could be something really good to see. Um, I think she said something about it's coming out late next year, and it's basically that's was pretty much it. Um, I'm not gonna lie, it is hard to listen to, um, mostly because some of the things maybe not to the degree of which she went through them. Um, I mean, there's things in my personal life that I'm not gonna get into on this show. Um, it's not that because I'm not really a sharing kind of guy. Um, there's people that know, and there's people that know to an extent, but there's a lot that I don't share. A lot of things that I don't share with anyone. It's probably not a good thing on my part, but it's clear that there's a lot of lessons um, to be learned uh, from what happened to Paige over this past year and such. Um, and again, like I said, I still don't think we got the whole story from Paige, but that's her decision on whether or not she wants to say that, not ours. She didn't even know it's this, but she did. She said just one time. One time she's going to talk about it, and she's done so. She's talked about it. And so um, I do listen to a lot of stuff, and sometimes I'll like do an off tweet. This is the first time I've ever done a show where I've reviewed a podcast and say that you should give it a listen. And you know, we may never know the whole story, but it may not. We don't need to know. You know, this is what I say in summation. She went through things we probably can't fathom. Had people she's never even met try to run her into the ground. Um, you know, almost committed suicide because of things from her past coming to light and having to relive it. She mentions having her nieces and nephews were getting stuff about this. That when she was with El Gasbag, his kids, you know, we're getting flack for this because it wasn't just her having to do with it. It was her family. People she cared about, and all of that being done. But she's mentioning not knowing why someone would do this. It's people that hate their lives and want to make everybody as miserable as they are. People with a God complex, they want to feel as though they have power over someone. And I guess in closing, at least as far as that's concerned, this does teach some valuable lessons. One, no matter how much you try to cover up, things will come to light. You eventually have to face it. And she did. She faced shit. And now she's come back on the other end. And things with Absolution going very well. Things are like going well. She mentions kind of want to stay single for a while, which I don't. You went through shit in that relationship, and probably shit she's never going to share. And that's okay. She didn't have to tell us this. I reiterate that a lot. And secondly, you give people power over you. You give as much, people only have the power over you that you give them. And it's unfortunate and sad that there are that there is people who feel so bad in their lives that they have to try to destroy other people's lives because they feel bad about their own. Let's think about it for just a second. She mentioned that she had thought about contemplating suicide. It was just in the news of an adult star taking her own life because of cyberbullying, because of the constant hounding about a decision that she made, a decision that was her decision to make. It's none of our business. It comes to a point where, but again, people have as much power over us as we let them have. The situation with Paige could have ended horribly. It's as I've mentioned probably several times. She could not be here. We could never see what's happening on Raw right now. But she came back. She went through hell, came through it, and now she's moving on. And it's basically the lessons we can take from this is no matter what's going on in your life, find the people that will help you. Find the people that will stand by you. And you can pretty much get through anything. Again, you should definitely give it a listen. I'm glad I did, but in a way I'm not glad I did because a lot of the things, I mean I've never had any dirty pictures of me put out for all to see, and I'm sure you're all glad for that. I know I am. Nobody needs to see all the body hair I have, but there's just things in this that struck a chord with me, and I've been talking with a lot of Paige fans who listen to this, and they lost it. They were crying. They're crying along with her. Even Paige broke down during this. And it's going to be very hard to get through the whole thing, especially that first hour. But it comes highly recommended. What are your thoughts if you have listened to the podcast? What are your thoughts on hearing about what she went through? As always, let me know in the comment section below. You can always talk to me via my social media. And, of course, if you haven't listened or watched this before, Please like this video, share it with everyone you know, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. So until next time, I'm the Guido, and I think we're done here.